Growing up, I had thick thighs. I wasn't a big child. I wasn't what you'd consider overweight. I had solid legs, though. I had a flat tummy, but very, very solid legs, which, as I became a teenager, I was very aware of. So, diets and exercises and things like that, nothing really changed my solid legs, like many lipedema women. At the age of 21, my thyroid kicked it in. So, this was the first part of my journey towards lipedema without me knowing. I can only see it looking back, right? My thyroid kicked in, but it took 2 years for me to find a doctor to understand why I was so shattered, why I couldn't do anything but sleep in between everything else I was doing, why I put on 50 kilos, over 100 pounds in such a short amount of time. It took for me to find a doctor who also had thyroid disease to find it. Because back then, we're talking 35 years ago now, it just wasn't something that doctors ordered automatically or thought about top of mind. It's still a struggle, but the struggle now more is about doctors finding blood tests to be, that's fine, right? Rather than going, no, we're not testing for that at all. So back then, so that was my first hormonal struggle in my lifetime, even though now that I think about it, growing up, I'd had really heavy periods, lots of pain during my periods, that kind of thing. So the hormonal stuff was already at play without my realizing it until I just said it then. When my thyroid kicked it in, that was very definitely the road of lipedema weight creeping in. Life went on as normal after that. I got married. I had a child. I was very lucky to have a child because I know that a lot of women with thyroid disease have fertility issues. So I had my first child. Life went on as normal. I didn't do anything out of the ordinary. I still did not know I had lipedema. Went on with every diet under the sun, known to man, as I'm sure if you're watching this, you have done every diet known to man also in an effort to fix this. When I was about 36, so I'd had my first child at 29. By the time I got to about 36, I was like, why haven't we fallen pregnant again yet? Because we decided at about, he was about 2, that, yep, all right, let's try again. Nothing happened. When we tried the first time round, we fell pregnant within a few months. I understand now just how rare that is for people with thyroid disease or hormonal issues in general. So around 36, I went to a specialist obstetrician. I went to a specialist doctor to get more serious tests around why I wasn't falling pregnant. The first thing the doctor said to me was, oh, you need to have weight loss surgery because you're just overweight. That's the problem. I didn't know that would be my future. I said to him, I said, but I don't eat anything. I don't eat much. And like normal people would, and I don't blame him for this, it's just a normal reaction to people that A plus B equals C, that I just ate too much. And so he said, no, there's nothing I can do for you fertility wise unless you're willing to consider weight loss surgery. So that was kind of the end of that. I just went, no, not doing it. However, I went home. We were living in Port Hedland at the time, and then discovered that there was a surgeon that flew in and out. And apparently he ran tests that normally you would have to go to other people for in a city because it was a rural area. And so I went along to see him, and he ordered an internal ultrasound and a few other bits and bobs. And then I got this piece of paper back that said, oh, you need to go down to Perth and have further tests because this is consistent with cancer. And I was like, oh, and that threw me for a loop, as it would. And so for about 2 or 3 weeks, in the time it took to get us down to Perth and have, further tests and so on, I was living with this potential diagnosis. Once we got down there and we saw a different person and a different doctor and all the things, turns out, no, it wasn't cancer. I had endometriosis, which I didn't know I had that either. And endometriosis, it's an increase in estrogen. Estrogen drives lipedema. So I was sort of getting up there with my weight at this point. As I say, like the highest I've kind of been. It was all driven. I can see it all in the rear vision mirror. I was like, oh yeah, of course that's how I got to there, because this happened and then this happened and then that happened, right? I had laser surgery on the endometriosis where they cleared it out, and that was that. That was, I was told to go home and you'll be fine. You'll probably fall pregnant and all is well, which I never did. I never fell pregnant again that I know of. I have quite a few moments of where I suspected that I had a very early pregnancy, because once you've been pregnant once, you know that feeling for yourself. I feel like there were quite a few times where I lost a very early pregnancy. I'm very pragmatic like that. You get what you're meant to get, you have what you're meant to have. It turned out that, we were only meant to have one child, which is, he's the joy of our life. So it's all good. And many people cannot even have that. So I'm super grateful for that. I had, though, after the endometriosis and all those issues, I had decided, when I decided that I'd stop trying, that I would have a hysterectomy and be done with it all, right? But I wasn't finished trying, and I'm pretty stubborn, and I'm like, no, I've got to be able to fall pregnant again. So the journey continued with trying all kinds of things from that perspective. Whether or not the endometriosis came back during that time, I'm not sure. And whether or not there were other reasons for me not being able to fall pregnant, I will never know. It doesn't matter. But that was the next step of driving my lipedema to become out of control. When we left Port Hedland and went down to Perth again, I went and saw a manual lymphatic drainage specialist. She was an oncology nurse who did massage for people with lipedema and lymphedema. I did not know this. I went to her for my thyroid problems, and because thyroid disease used to be called edema back in the day, so fluid retention. So I was always kind of working on something. At this point in time, I had not started studying naturopathy yet. So I went to her to have a massage, work on my drainage, that kind of thing. And I sat beside her and she said, just pull up your dress for me. And I pulled up my dress and she goes, oh, you're a lippy lady. A what? I'm a what, right? And I'd never heard of this before. And so I'd heard of lymphedema, which most people have heard of, when you damage a lymph node. And so it usually blows up one side, so it's asymmetrical, whereas lipedema is something you're born with and is symmetrical, so in both sides of your body. But I'd never heard anyone ever say anything about such a thing as lipedema. So she was really like matter of fact about it, because she saw so many people with it, I'm assuming. And she gave me some brochures and some pamphlets to explain it. And she, did the massage for me, and she suggested compressions and wrapping and all kinds of things. And I was overwhelmed, to say the least. I was like, well, what are you talking about? Why would I wrap up my legs? I'm just like, I went back to her a few times for the massage and just said, oh, look, don't worry about the wrapping and all that kind of thing. The massage is fine. And that was that. I didn't really, after that, sort of think about the lipedema, because I still didn't really truly understand how it had impacted my life. I hadn't put that together yet. So roll around to age 42, and that was the year that I decided I'm done trying to have a baby. By this time, I was 2 or 3 years into studying naturopathy, clinical nutrition, and herbalism. I had put everything I learned to the test, having all sorts of potions and all sorts of things to try and fall pregnant again. And I just got to a point where I went, you know what, I'm done. I'm done. I was still having really heavy periods. It was quite miserable. You know what it's like if you're there. And I just went, I'm done. And I'd always said, when I'm done, I'm having a hysterectomy. I'm just done. And so it was super easy. And I think it was because I'd always had it in my head that I'm just going to have a hysterectomy. It's going to be fine. And so I did, and it was. So that's mindset for you people. It's like I had just decided that's what was going to happen. And honestly, it was the best thing I've ever done, because I've never had a period since then. I've never had any problems with it since then. Because of what I know about menopause and all that kind of thing, I never went through that. So it was just oh, I just lost that horrible period that I was having every month by having that hysterectomy. And I lost the stress of forever thinking, why am I not falling pregnant this week? That's a huge rise in cortisol for anybody to handle that constant monthly looking at taking tests, hoping, waiting, hoping your period doesn't come, that kind of thing. And so that took away not only the hormone surges that I was having every month and potentially the estrogen increases in endometriosis coming back, but it took away that huge cortisol spike that I was experiencing by that forever hoping and wanting and wishing, right? So it did two things for me. So I will never regret that. It was the best decision that I could have made for myself at that time. And I still have no regrets over it. Okay, roll around age 49. Now, I had been trying to exercise and diet my way out of this excess weight. I would go on walks begrudgingly with my husband. I would do all the things, join the gym from here and there, do the swimming, anything that I could think of. My knees were constantly in pain, which I thought was just from the excess weight. Didn't think that one through. It wasn't until a friend said to me one day, did you know there's a SKG, which is one of our places here in Australia that, take x-rays and all that kind of thing, MRIs, CAT scans. And she said, if you go to the SKG in Mandurah, a little place down near where we live or used to live, she said, you can have them for free. You can have an MRI for free. And I was like, because the last MRI I'd had was like $800 or something ludicrous. I was like, wow. And I was heading down to Perth a month later or something like that. And I thought, oh, I'm going to get my doctor to write up a thingy so that I can go and have this checked out, make sure my knees are just okay. Because it was this lady's daughter who I knew up here who had been just trying to exercise her way out of a bad knee. She had a MRI and there was something, I'm just trying to remember. I think there was something wrong with her knee or, and she would never have known had she not had the MRI. So it prompted me to think, right, I need to just double check that there's nothing actually wrong with my knees apart from the excess weight. I had to come back over 2 days because they can only do a free one on one day. They can't back up both knees. So I had one day and one the next day. And my doctor came back to me and said, oh, you need to find a surgeon. We need to get an opinion on this because it's pretty bad. And so I found a surgeon through our insurance company so that I knew it was completely covered. And he said to me, can you please stop exercising? That was his response. You're not exercising your way out of this. By the time I had surgery, I had like 4 meniscal tears, a ruptured ACL. This is over both knees, a ruptured ACL, a Baker cyst, a huge Baker cyst on the back of one of my knees, and a couple of other things. I can't remember, but bone on bone. So I was just trying to keep going. And is it any wonder I was in pain? I can look back at the previous couple of years before that of holidays and I look at photos and I go, oh, I just remember the pain you were in when that photo was taken. And that's really sad when you think back on times in your life that should have been happy and joyful. And all you can think of and all you can see is, oh, I remember what pain I was in. That particular trip, what saved me was the foot massages every day. This was Thailand. And it was like, wow, had I not had those foot massages every day? And I only said to my husband a couple of days ago, actually, telling him that story of the pain. And I went, what was happening with those foot massages is they weren't helping my knee pain because clearly my knees were shot. They were helping the lipedema, right? They were helping me feel like I could walk again the next day. It's amazing what you can see when you look back on things. So that was really, really fascinating because had I not had those daily foot and leg massages, I would not have been able to rock up the next day and keep walking because we, like you do on holidays in places like that, we were doing 20,000 steps a day. So those massages helped my lymphatics, helped the venous return. That's what kept me going. So at age 49, after getting that response from the MRIs on my knees, thank goodness I had that done. And I ended up at the end of that year, Christmas, it was literally right before Christmas, the 16th of December, 2020 is what it was. And I had a double knee replacement. Because I'm all about logistics, I had them both done at once because we had to leave here, go down to Perth. My husband had to take carer's leave, and I was off for 5 weeks. It was the hardest surgery I had ever had. And I've had a cesarean. So this topped everything before it and after it. So the weight loss surgery, the arm surgery, nothing. The double knee replacement. Would I do it again knowing? I would never do two at once knowing. However, logistically, it's what we needed to do so that we could have them done. So I'm never one to shy away from the practicalities of things, but wow, the pain was insane. And, that probably contributed to cortisol and to my lipedema at this point in time. Keep in mind, I was still not really understanding how much lipedema had impacted this. I still wasn't there yet. Even after studying naturopathy, which it never came up then, I was still in this phase of, oh, it's something I've done. It's something I've done wrong. I let my weight get out of control, my thyroid, all of the things. It was still my fault. It was still something I potentially could have, not gone down that road of had I been a better person. That's kind of how we look at it, right? If we were better people, we'd have more willpower and we wouldn't have put on this weight in the first place and our knees would be fine. That's where I was. So still at this point. Okay, let's go to age 51. This particular year for me, I was approached by somebody off Thyroid School, my other platform, if you don't know about that, to coach her through gastric sleeve surgery. And I said to her at the time, I said, look, I'm not your person because I've never considered it. I don't eat enough. It's a thyroid thing. You put on weight even though you eat nothing. I said, you probably need to deal with somebody who knows more about it. And she said, no, I want you. And I was like, oh, okay, right. She was really insistent. So I said to her, okay, let me research this and I'll come back to you. So I spoke to some people around me who had had the surgery. What's your experience? How did you go? What were the upsides? What were the downsides? I researched it. I researched everything up, down, sideways, particularly with the impact of thyroid disease because she was on Thyroid School. So this is, I knew that was an issue for her. So I was looking at all these different studies and I found some studies that included Hashimoto's, which is what I have had. I reversed the antibodies a long time ago, but I had that. Also, I found a couple of studies around lipedema. And that's really the first time that I started to go, what? Hang on a sec, and started to dig a bit deeper into this issue. I'm really glad I did. Clearly, because it explained so much once I started deep diving into it. And obviously, I just needed to get to that phase where I was ready. I'd spent the last 15 years studying everything there is to know about thyroid disease, and it was now time to dig into the lipedema because I found studies during that time, during that research for that lady, around how such a high percentage of women with thyroid disease also have lipedema and vice versa. So it was a very interlinked situation. So that was when I started looking deeper into it and understanding how potentially that's what made my knees in such a bad way, potentially hypermobile joints, that kind of thing. And so things started to click into my brain. I went back to that lady and I said to her, look, not only am I happy to coach you through weight loss surgery, I'm going to have it for myself. And she said to me, that's okay. I've changed my mind. I'm not ready for that. So she was just put in my way to show me to look up these things and to open my eyes to what potentially I could do to help myself. It still took a lot for me, as it does for most people, to consider such a thing, because what's the first thing we consider? What are people going to think of me? They're going to think I eat too much, right? Tell me I'm wrong. It's not that is exactly what goes through your head. People are going to judge me for thinking I eat too much and I need gastric sleeve surgery to help curb my hunger, which couldn't have been further from the truth. However, what I found was from lipedema standpoint, and you don't actually lose lipedema fat when you have gastric sleeve surgery, but it helps you lose all the other fat that is not lipedema fat. And that's where I'm at, sort of, fast forward now, is that I've lost all the weight except for the lipedema fat. So I just got to that point where I knew within my heart, and this is where you have to get to if you're considering such a thing, or anything that you consider, that other people might judge you over, is, have you tried everything else that you are ready to try or have considered or has come across your path? And that's where I got to. I was like, I could hand on heart say I had tried everything, and I had tried everything like very strictly. And I knew that within myself, right? It doesn't matter what other people think in that respect. If you know you've done things perfectly according to all the literature and the coaches and the dietary protocols, etc., and you're still not making headway, that's all that matters, is what you know about what you've done. We're never going to change what other people think of us, ever. So I knew, hand on heart, I had given it every chance to reduce that weight. And I thought, I don't eat much anyway. That was the worst case scenario in my head of having gastric sleeve surgery, was that I couldn't eat much, and I didn't do that anyway. So I was like, win-win. And for me, it was like, well, if I can't lose weight with this is like the biggest thing I could have done. And then I was going to have to just come to terms with the fact that this is me for the rest of my life, and I need to learn to love myself that way. So that was kind of my reasoning from that perspective. So as happens in our life, when we decide something, it happens usually pretty quickly. Within 6 months, I'd had the surgery. Within 6 months of deciding, the surgery was done. And I had gone down to Perth for it, to have it done. I kept it secret from my Thyroid School platform because, again, I was just so terrified of the judgment of, but you're a naturopath. And I have had that, don't get me wrong, but you're a naturopath. I don't trust naturopaths that, need surgical help to fix things. And I'm like, well, I became a naturopath to help fix my thyroid problems. So I will use this tool, I will use that tool, I will use any tool available to me that I feel like might be of help to me. Because the only thing that matters is that I feel like I'm making headway with my health. I might share my story everywhere in hopes to help other people think of things differently. That's all I'm trying to do, is, what have you got to lose to try something that other people around you wouldn't have? But if it resonates with you, try it. What have you got to lose? And I had nothing left to lose because I'd done all the diets. So there I was, going in to have my surgery. It was still the height of COVID, so my husband couldn't come in with me, and I had to go it alone, which was really kind of poetic, because you do this kind of surgery for yourself. So it made kind of sense to me from a soul level, that it made sense that I was in there facing this on my own. I would have preferred him with me, don't get me wrong, but it was just that moment of, yep, I'm doing this for me, so I'm here for me. I had to be there for me. And as you can see, it was a successful surgery, and that led me to lose 60 kilos. And as far as I can tell now, I'm kind of stable. Hard to say, because I've seen people 5 years down the track, and I'm 3 years down the track, and I've seen people 5 years down the track suddenly lose more weight for no good reason. But I've had no issues. I've had no problems. I did all the mindset work. I'm a kinesiologist, so I did that on myself almost daily. In fact, I'm going to say daily for probably a year, so that I had a successful outcome with this surgery. And I did. I've lost the weight. I've kept the weight off, and I can eat anything. There's nothing that makes me sick. From a perspective of, some people could like literally vomit after water, or can't swallow steak, or things like that. Me, nothing. I can eat anything I like. I can drink water, no issues whatsoever. So that was a success. And all I can assume is that because it changes the hormones in your gut, and hormones drive lipedema, I halted lipedema from progressing, and I've lost all the weight that is not lipedema. Okay, age 52. I was, I'm going to say 8 months in to weight loss surgery. I had lost, actually, it might have been less than that. October, November, December, January, February, March. No, I was 5 months in. I'd lost 30 kilos at this point, so half of my weight. We were going off to Bali for a trip, 4 weeks. And my husband was like, oh, and normally this would have been me too. Need to lose a bit of weight for Bali, right? Because you always put on weight in Bali. So you got to kind of preempt it so you can have the cocktails and you can have the nice foods and that sort of thing. So that when you come back, you're kind of your normal weight. I don't know if anyone else does that or used to do that. That was our experience. And so I said to him, you know what? The last time you lost weight, you ate nothing but meat. That was long before I became a naturopath. So I said to him, you know, that's what you did. You just cut out all the crap, which kind of left him with meat. But this time around, I was sort of like, oh, is that safe? Because I'd had 4 years of training by this time. And so I had to go researching it. And now it's called the carnivore diet. So I just kind of said, right, okay, I started coming across all this research about how it's reversed people's thyroid issues, that it has changed anxiety, depression, reversed all kinds of autoimmune diseases. And I was like, wow, like I was still a bit disbelieving because I'd had all these years of training around plant-based eating. And I very much thought, how can this be? But I kept diving into it because if there's one thing I've learned in my journey of life is that you have to be open-minded that what you think can evolve. And I'm not going to say what you think is wrong because what we think and what we believe at any given time in our life is correct for us, okay, in that time frame of all of our experiences of what we're going through at that given time. But we need to be open to that belief system changing and evolving and growing as we do. And that's okay, right? We judge ourselves 6 ways from Sunday because, oh, but no, I've always believed in plant-based eating. I've run challenges on Thyroid School around plant-based eating. I can't tell everyone, it's a bit like the gastric sleeve, right? I can't tell people that now I believe in carnivore. Or can you? Because I did. It's not ideal, but I think you've got to sometimes lead the way for other people to go, it's okay to give themselves permission to try something new. And I always give myself permission if I find some new study or, I mean, there's something called the sugar diet that's just come out recently that the carnivores are all talking about. And I haven't even delved into that yet because that's just a mind blow. Like, what's a sugar diet? Is it? But if I find research and they study things and that go, oh, this is what people with lipedema need now, you can bet your bottom dollar I'm going to try it. I'm absolutely going to give myself permission to go, I've got nothing to lose. Why not try it? If all the scientists say this is the science now and there's no other reason around why I shouldn't try it, I'm going to try it. So I got on the carnivore bandwagon with Ollie, my husband, because I was like, well, I eat so little now that I literally, for the first time in my life, couldn't be bothered making a separate meal for myself because I was eating so little. So I just had the meat with him. Blow me down, 3 weeks of this, and instead of losing a kilo a week, which is what I had been doing right from the get-go after the gastric sleeve surgery, I was losing 2 to 3 kilos a week. Go figure. And I was like, this is weird. On top of that, I've never felt so clear, so motivated, so focused, so energized. I felt amazing. I tracked all of this thinking, what is this about, right? And so we went off to Bali. I gave myself permission. We were on holidays to drink. I couldn't really drink a lot of cocktails because of the gastric sleeve. There's too much. I would have a few sips. Hubby would finish it for me. I learned on that, and I'm not recommending this, but I learned that a shot, like a B52 or a squashed frog or those sorts of shots that we used to have in the 80s, my 80s friends, that was the best option for me because everyone would have a cocktail. I'd order a shot, and that would be what I sipped on kind of all night. So it was that, and that was perfect for me, right? So if I felt like drinking, that's what I would drink. So it didn't fill my tummy up. So I even had, I remember having garlic bread and what else did I have? Pasta carbonara, all the things that I normally would not eat anyway. I was just finding it fascinating after gastric sleeve surgery that I could eat these things and still be okay. 2 weeks into our 4-week holiday, I was like, oh, I really miss the meat. And because it's not cheap to eat the steaks and the animal foods in places like Bali and Thailand. That's the dearer thing. It's cheaper to have the pastas, that sort of thing. And in Bali, we didn't really eat street food. Street food in Thailand, brilliant, but not so much Bali. I've never been brave enough. They look different. I'm sure they're not, but they do to me, right? That was my comfort point. And 2 weeks in, I was just like, I've got to have meat again. And I couldn't believe I just was craving the meat. So from then on, for the last 2 weeks of the holidays, I still had, my shots here and there and a few sips of cocktails and things like that. So I wasn't being, a Puritan, but every time we went for a meal and for our buffet breakfast, I would load up on eggs and bacon. And then at the meals, I would order a surf and turf, so steak and prawns or whatever. And I would give, what I couldn't eat, because clearly a big meal I couldn't eat it. I would give the rest to my husband. So that was how carnivore came about. And then when I got back from that holiday, I just kind of stayed in that eating way, that eating lifestyle, because I felt so good. And that's what I always come back to with anything you try and anything you do. Once you get past the actual detox, there's always going to be detox. And detox is not a reason to go, oh, it doesn't agree with me because I gave up coffee and I must need coffee because I had a detox symptom. It's that kind of mentality. So once you get past the detox symptoms of anything that you're trying, if you feel really good, then why would you not continue, right? No matter how fanciful or weird or strange or against your health that it seems from other people. What matters is coming back to yourself and going, no, you know what? I'm motivated, I'm focused, I'm clear, I'm decisive. How many of you are indecisive about things? When I'm eating pure carnivore, I'm like that. When I bring in the ketovore kind of thing or the keto things, I'm still pretty good, but not as sharp as I am with pure carnivore. I just don't believe carnivore is sustainable for me for 100% of the time. I do bring in avocado. I seem to be good with avocado. I do bring in, I've discovered a little bit of sauerkraut's good for me, so there's things that I bring in here and there. So I'm not a pure carnivore. I just call myself carnivore because that reminds me every time I say it that I feel great when I eat that way. And it doesn't matter what other people think. It really doesn't, because they're not sleeping in your brain, in your mind, in your body. It only matters what you think. But I know that is tough to get past. Roll around age 53. We had our arms done. I don't know if you can see. I'm assuming you can. There's very faint, so this was a year and a bit ago now, very faint marks from having my wings cut off, right? I need more muscles. Oh, look at my muscles. There you go. So that was the next part of the journey, because by this time I was fully in the understanding and fully diving into lipedema. And I understood for the first time in my life that my huge arms that sort of stopped at the elbow and huge was lipedema. And I took the blame off myself for the first time in my life. That was a good thing. I had my arms done. That was a great experience. I had no problems with that. It's healing beautifully. And for the first time in my life, I can put my arms up, or I can do this, or hang washing up, or whatever it is I'm doing. And for the first time in my life, I'm not going, oh, somebody might be looking at my arms. That lack of stress, that lack of self-judgment and self-criticism and fear of what people are saying or looking or thinking of you, that has been priceless in my world. Do I have further surgeries to do? Yes, I do. I have quite significant loose skin on my tummy and my thighs. If you've watched my calf raise challenge, you'll see my thighs and loose skin in all their glory. They're not great, but those surgeries will come down the track and I will share them when that time comes. But that's where I'm at so far. You can see, looking back, I've had a lifetime of hormonal imbalance that drives lipedema. I have had a lifetime of inflammation. Thyroid disease is an inflammatory disease, just like lipedema. Inflammation drives lipedema. And I've spent all those years thinking it's something I do. It's my fault. I'm lazy. I'm all the things. And it was not. Okay. So learning that in itself is something that I want you to know. It's not your fault. And I am only just now fully embracing anything to do with lipedema, which is why this channel is now called Lipedema Life, because I've realized now for the rest of my life and everything to do with my life, it's not just what you eat. It's not just, are you moving enough? It's not just wearing compressions. It's not just, keeping the hormones level. It's everything. And having surgeries and all that sort of thing and the liposuction and everything that it involves, well, that's great. It's not an answer, though. It can come back if you don't do the other work around no seed oils and higher omega-3s, lower omega-6s, all those sorts of things that contribute to the driving of lipedema. It can come back. Having liposuction and removing the lipedema fat that's in there and having your skin tightened and all that's really lovely. But what it doesn't do is fix the mechanism that causes it in the first place, because they haven't worked out what that truly is yet. There's lots of different ideas and solid hypotheses, which is how science always starts. It's an hypothesis. It's an educated guess as to what's happening. But having the surgery does not fix the cause until they know what that is. So yes, you can always grow it back again if you're not deep diving into all the other reasons as to why your lipedema potentially is out of control in the first place. So looking back on your life is a great exercise. Look back at the major things in your life. And for me, it's all been hormones. I've had all these moments of high hormonal and high inflammatory times. My knees, can you imagine the inflammation that was going through my body for years prior to having my knees done, where I just tried to walk it off? Okay, so inflammation and hormones, they're the things. Being kind to yourself, lower that cortisol and understand that this isn't your fault. That's been one of the biggest journeys that I've had on for myself, is understanding that this is not my fault. I am not the number on the scales. I am not the size of my clothing. That's not who I am, and that's okay. So that's my story so far. I'm going to check in another year and do this again and tell you where I'm at in another year's time, because I'm hoping to have had more surgeries by then. And I will no doubt have learnt more about lipedema then, because I'm never going to not stop learning about this disease for the rest of my life.